Turkey or Georgia, Mersin or Batumi. These destinations are currently of interest to buyers of overseas real estate. Buy for vacation, buy for investment, buy to put your money somewhere. Which destination is interesting? What are the nuances? What are the hidden pitfalls? We will go through 12 parameters: taxes, paperwork, climate, and all other aspects, with my partner Ekaterina Kotlirova. We have worked together for many years, we know each other well, and I assure you, she is a real estate expert. She will be our speaker on Georgia. I give the floor to Ekaterina. Please introduce yourself and briefly tell us why Georgia, what options can we offer in Georgia, and why should people come to you?
Hello, first of all, Alexandra. Hello, friends. Thank you for inviting me to your wonderful podcast. I hope it will be interesting today. Indeed, I have been working in international real estate for 20 years, and for many, many years I have been involved with Georgia. Why Georgia? It's close, accessible, comfortable, and very simple. Just the other day, my mother flew to Georgia for the first time in many years, and she was amazed at how it's convenient. You get on a plane in Moscow, and in 2 hours you land at Batumi airport. It's very convenient. It's cheap. In general, all the advantages are there, which is why Georgia is chosen so often now. And why should you come to us? Well, because we offer a very wide range of options, both completed and under construction properties, from developers and on the secondary market in the wonderful, respectable coastal city of Batumi and in Tbilisi.
Katerina, I suggest we move on. There are 12 different topics. For each topic, I will ask questions. Let's do a comparison together. I'll give you the first word. That is, you will answer the question specifically about Georgia. It would probably be more relevant to talk about Batumi because as summer approaches, people start looking for a summer house. It's also important to mention that real estate prices in these locations are similar. But there are various nuances, and these nuances need to be taken into account when buying real estate. Katerina, regarding the purposes for buying real estate, for what reasons do people purchase property in Georgia, specifically in Batumi? People buy it for vacation. If it's for vacation, then during which season? If we're talking about buyers by geography, from which countries do they come? What ages are they? Who is it suitable for? Real estate in Georgia, specifically in Batumi.
Thank you for the question, Alexandra. So first of all, who is buying and for what purpose, right? People buy for completely different reasons. First of all, of course, everyone now combines investment goals with personal use. That is, people buy it as a kind of distant summer cottage by the sea, which is actually more affordable than Russian resorts, and with good accessibility, as I already mentioned. And at the same time, they want to rent it out. So people buy in order to live there for a certain season and rent it out the rest of the time. This is the most common scenario. So investment plus personal use. But many also buy for relocation, for moving there. That's also a goal and quite a common one.
People who already live in Batumi or have already bought property there. So my neighbors, if I'm in Batumi, who are they? From which countries? So I can understand the community.
From all over the world. From all over the world. There are Russians, Ukrainians, Belarusians, Americans, and Israelis. It's a lot of people from the sea and a lot of Arabs as well. So it's truly the whole world. That's absolutely true. Israelis and Arabs fly here. Arabs come because it's a calmer place, not as hot. Israelis have been coming all this time because it's close by. The number of flights is insane. You can fly here and play in the casino. There are even special casino tours. They are accommodated in a specific hotel, they live there, and then some end up buying property. For Russians, as I mentioned, there's a direct airline available, and it's inexpensive. And it's basically the same for Belarus as well. So it's the whole world. By the way, Poles too. There was actually a whole wave of Poles who were buying and flying in.
Was that recently?
Well, no, not anymore. That was a long time ago.
I'll share when it happened for us. Let me answer about Mersin. Who buys from us and for what purposes? Mersin is on the Mediterranean Sea, and people choose it primarily as a summer house. They choose it primarily as a resort property. Our swimming season is quite long. From May, they already start preparing the pools. The sea is warm, and October is actually a really good season. And there are also buyers from various regions. We have buyers from different countries. Russia, Ukraine, America, and lately Germany and Poland have been very active, as well as the Baltics, other European countries, and Canada. They choose this place as their summer home. Mersin is also now interesting from an investment perspective. In Mersin, rental returns are attractive and profitable due to the lack of hotels. So in your case, there are hotels and a casino, and that's a point of attraction. We don't have those, and that's also a point of attraction, even though it's the opposite situation. And it's an opportunity to invest your money, and prices in Mersin are rising. Thank you for answering on the blog. Now let's talk about the climate. How comfortable is it for vacationing? Let's talk about the beach season and the beach itself. What is the climate like? What is the weather like? In which seasons, just briefly, regarding temperature, humidity, rain, snow, and whatever else there might be. Could you describe what the local beaches are like? What can you tell us about the condition of the sea? And are there any other notable natural attractions worth mentioning, specifically near the real estate we're discussing? And what kind of vacation format or climate-focused lifestyle do individuals looking to purchase real estate here in Georgia most often choose? Specifically, let's talk about Batumi.
Well, in Batumi, the beaches are mostly rocky, which, for example, I don't really like. But there are different kinds of rocks. Some are big boulders, some are small pebbles. It depends on the location in Batumi. But there are also magnetic sands, and there are black sandy beaches which are surprisingly beneficial. For example, the most famous hotel called Paragraph, which is a well-known chain near Batumi, is located there. And there you'll find this magnetic sand, which is considered a centuries-old health resort. Even back in Soviet times, people used to go there. So of course it varies. But mostly all of Batumi has pebble beaches. Well, it's called pebbles. There is an advantage. The sea is clean.
Yes, there are some clients, some people who prefer sandy beaches, and there are those who like pebble beaches. So it's neither good nor bad, it's just a matter of taste.
Yes, absolutely. As for the climate, well, we know it's subtropical, so of course there are lots and lots and lots of rains, definitely, yes.
In different seasons.
In different seasons? It depends on your luck. For example, I flew there this winter on December 23rd. The weather was gorgeous, sunny. I arrived from Moscow, where it was cold. The weather was very nice, the air was fresh, it was warm, everyone was wearing windbreakers. Well, that's how it is, right? But at the same time, you might arrive and it could be raining. Batumi is like a woman. It has the same kind of mood. So in the morning, it might be sunny, by evening, it could be raining, and at night, the sun might come out again. You have to understand that there are mountains behind Batumi, and the mountains hold back the clouds, so they often stay there, right? But from time to time it pours rain, and everyone who lives there knows this feature. So on the one hand, the air is clean, fresh, and there's never any extreme heat in Batumi. Of course, it's warmer than in many other regions, but at the same time, it's still quite humid.
Can you give us some numbers? When does summer start? When does the season begin? What are the temperatures like? Of course, with different humidity and winds, it feels different. But still, what do the thermometers show in winter and summer? What does winter look like, and when does summer end?
Well, the season is generally considered warm, even if it's not swimming season, from May to probably September. Sometimes people even swim in October, sometimes even in November. So it's kind of shifted in that direction, right? But still, it's more of a classic summer season, right? May. At the beginning, you won't start swimming unless you really can. June, July, August, the classic months, everyone swims. So it's not a very long season. Of course, we always include September, the velvet season. The weather is always very nice. The temperature can reach up to 32 to 33 degrees, so it's possible. But mostly it's 27 to 28, that's the typical temperature. Sometimes it's 24, that's about the season. The most unpleasant month is probably February, when it's neither here nor there yet. At that time there might be snow. For them it's a huge deal, it's like an earthquake, a catastrophe. This does happen, by the way. The year before last there was snow, so it falls from time to time, but for them it doesn't stay. It falls and then melts right away. But if it does stay on the ground, then it's chains. Well, you probably know, I don't know if it's like that where you are. It's a disaster, nobody works and everything comes to a halt. So, in general, the temperature in winter hovers around zero. Yes, maybe -2, -3, but sometimes it gets even colder, but that's about it. Mostly, I think it's above zero, just slightly, like +3, +4, +5. So in winter, it's usually somewhere from -5 to +5, up to +10. That's normal winter weather.
A comfortable time to live here. So when is the best time to really enjoy it?
To really enjoy it, if you like warm weather, it's July and August. But in August, it can get a bit too hot. And like everywhere else on the Black Sea, there can be infections and all that. So June and July are great, but I personally like May. There aren't any crowds yet, no school kids, no students, and everything is already in bloom. Everything smells wonderful. The nature there is amazing, absolutely fantastic. One of Batumi's biggest advantages is its incredible tropical nature with palm trees growing everywhere. Everything is green, and Batumi is a very green city. There's a huge, gorgeous park by the sea where you can walk and walk even in winter. It's a green, evergreen park, just like that. Only
the park or the city itself as well?
Definitely the park, the city in some places. For example, New Batumi, the area that's currently popular for buying property, where the main developers are. It's not as green there because it's basically like New York. It's like New York with huge skyscrapers and so on. So it's not like the sea with villages, of course, but there are parks everywhere.
Let me tell you about Mersin. Obviously, the Black Sea is going to be colder than the Mediterranean Sea. And in Mersin, on the Mediterranean, well, first of all, there is never any snow in winter, ever. And unfortunately or fortunately, we as kids have never seen snow. And if there is snow, it's only in the mountains at the ski resort, and it takes 3 hours to get there, so it's a whole adventure. In winter, it's 15 degrees above zero. For us, that's when it's cold. At night, it can drop to 10 degrees above zero. In December, it's still 20 degrees, and by the end of February, it's already 20 degrees again. Right now, at the end of April, it's already 20 to 25 degrees. And basically, we can declare the start of summer and the preparations for the season. The comfortable swimming season also starts in May. From May on, we already consider it the season. And October is definitely still the season. In November, you can still confidently swim during the first half of the month. Sometimes the temperature even reaches 25 degrees all the way into December. So obviously the season is a little bit longer here. As for the temperatures in summer, and regarding the humidity, geographically, or rather Batumi and Mersin are similar in that we also have mountains. Maybe they are just a bit farther away than in Batumi, but all the excess humidity condenses there. And in the summertime, we actually can't see the mountains. The summer temperature is 35 degrees, with the hottest periods being in August. And September, that's why our children start school on September 15th, not on the 1st like in many other places. So our summer is also shifted a bit later. And during this time, the temperature reaches up to 35 degrees. September is really a bold continuation of summer, so it will be comfortable to vacation here if you also love warm seaside weather. From June through October inclusive, this is the time when you can truly enjoy the temperature, the weather, and most importantly, the sea. As for the location, it's very important how to get here and how many international flights there are. I want to emphasize that we're not just talking about Russia. If there are buyers from other countries, or if you know about flights in different directions, or from Batumi, where you can fly to, and from the airport itself, how comfortable is it to get to, let's say, the places where people usually choose to live in their own property?
Well, first of all, I was surprised on the one hand that from Batumi you can fly to a lot of places. For example, you can't fly directly from Batumi to Turkey. You can only get there with a layover. That's kind of paradoxical, isn't it? I mean, I tried from Batumi. You can get to some places, but it's the border with Trabzon. It's the border with Turkey. Everyone takes cars and drives, right? But you can't fly out of Batumi. Direct flights from Batumi. As I said, it's to various countries, Arab countries, yes. There's Israel, a lot of flights, Russia, a lot of flights, Belarus, and a certain number of European flights. So that's probably basically all of it. The largest airport in Georgia is in Tbilisi, plus there's another airport about 3 hours drive from us. Yes, well, past Batumi, and there are more flights there. For example, from Tbilisi, you can fly directly to almost anywhere in the world. almost the entire world, and it's very cheap. And
how long does the trip from Tbilisi take?
4 hours.
4 hours. Along a beautiful mountainous
road.
Train?
There's a train, it's very convenient, and depending on which train it is, it takes 4 to 6 hours, yes.
Excellent. In Mersin, let me brag a little, I love to brag, a new airport has recently opened. By the standards of waiting, we waited 13 years for the Chukurova airport. In Mersin it opened, and it's already been operating for a year and a half. Now, why is our destination interesting to Germans? 6 German cities have direct flights, Amsterdam has flights, Beirut has flights. Obviously, there are excellent connections, domestic flights to any city. In fact, from Tambut, you can fly out every hour. Moscow, there are flights. In general, they change from time to time. There are currently discussions about launching Turkish Airlines flights to Moscow. So far, CIS countries are not involved in any way, but because this is a new, large, modern airport, there are talks about opening 16 new international routes in Mersin, and the city itself is located near the airport. It's literally 40 minutes away, and the locations where foreigners usually buy property are about an hour's drive from there. There are no trains or anything like that yet, but that's in progress. So right now you can get from the airport either by taxi or by buses that go to various destinations.
And I'd like to add something here, if I may. First of all, I want to clarify that, of course, there are flights from Batumi to Istanbul, yes, to Istanbul. It's just that there are no flights to Alanya or Antalya, but there are flights to Istanbul. Secondly, I'd like to point out that our airport is located right in the city, and from my own apartment, it takes me 15 minutes to get to the airport. At the same time, the airport doesn't bother me. It is above...
Planes don't fly over the city?
No, they fly to the side, land from over the water, they land from the sea. And it's an old airport, they're going to renovate it somehow. It's quite modern, but already rather old. And that's interesting, it even gives it a certain charm. You'd think that people who live, for example, in Russia, can't stand it. It's strange that there's no airport noise. We've sold many houses right next to it, bordering the airport. That is, from the apartment, you can see the runway. People come there to do Instagram shoots because they stand like this film, and the plane is flying right at you. I've seen so much of this myself. Even my close friend actually went there to do it and then showed me. It's like the plane is flying right at you. I mean, well, it's forbidden, but you can stand a bit to the side and you get that kind of view. So there's this kind of interesting peculiarity.
We've talked about the periods when it's comfortable to live there. So, folks, we've talked about it. People who want to stay longer in the location, not just those who came for a vacation or just to swim in the sea, but for a longer period. Moving for relocation or for permanent residence. How realistic is it to get a residence permit or citizenship? Let's start with the visa-free regime. What does it look like for most foreigners? How long is it allowed for? Is it possible to obtain a residence permit by purchasing real estate or even without purchasing real estate? Starting from what amount? On what grounds? Is it possible to obtain citizenship? And under what conditions, if it is possible? And who can and how difficult is it to obtain foreign residency or citizenship in Georgia?
Yes, well, this is my favorite question because we've always benefited from it, and the peak of our sales, of course, came during the time when people started actively coming, especially from Russia. Why is that? Because Georgia is probably the only country that allows most foreigners, not just Russians, but the majority, a great many foreigners, to live in the country 365 days a year. That is, you can live here, leave once, and then come back in.
Do a visa run.
Yes, so it's a visa-free regime. Basically, most countries have a visa-free regime with Georgia, with no restrictions. Not 90 days, not 180, but a full 365 days. But now, of course, they've started to tighten control a bit. Recently, this situation has been getting stricter, and now it's still better to get a residence permit if you're living here, especially if you're working. They've now passed a new law. If you're a foreigner working in Batumi or in Georgia, you have to process certain documents and register as a foreigner. On what grounds can you get a residence permit? You can get a residence permit in Georgia. We have lawyers. It can be done. The first and probably the simplest is the work residence permit. That is, a work permit not as someone who was hired, but, for example, if you work in your own sole proprietorship or in your own LLC as a director. For example, I have an LLC and I am the director and general director there, so I work as a foreigner and I have the right to open it for myself and process the paperwork. I registered it some time ago, quite a while back, and now I have to register myself in the registry of foreigners who work on the territory of Georgia, even though I don't live in Georgia. But on this basis, I can obtain a residence permit. If I have a turnover of up to 50,000 lari, I can get a residence permit, officially apply and reside there, absolutely freely, in fact. Besides this, you can also be employed under a labor contract, of course, and so on. But the simplest way is what I mentioned. The second option, of course, is the nomad visa, meaning for digital nomads. As for citizenship, that's practically impossible in Georgia. That is, it's based on national criteria. You have to prove you have relatives. That is, these are the roots. Well, or
Get married.
yes, getting married. But this is not a topic for everyone.
Not
Real estate. Yes. I remember the third one. Of course, this is an investment. This investment of $100,000 in real estate allows you to receive $100,000 in new residence permit. Here are three main reasons, not counting got married, and so on. This is an investment of $100,000. This is a digital nomad, and as I said, a labor one. These are the three main things our lawyers can help with. And in principle, it is legal.
I will draw conclusions. When purchasing real estate for $100,000, does the market cadastral investment matter?
Cadastral.
From the market?
Very similar.
It seems by purchasing real estate in Georgia for $100,000 or more, people can obtain a residence permit for their entire family.
On myself and then
To my beloved wife.
on myself, on minor children and on family members, that is, on my wife, yes.
Okay, and at the same time, a residence permit also gives the right to work.
A residence permit doesn't give the right to work, which is different.
It's different, so if I want to work, I need to get a work permit.
Yes, or open an individual entrepreneur, i.e. status. And by the way, in Georgia, I know it's a completely different situation, quite strange. This is the easiest way to work. You open your own IE, do it at the registration office in one day, and open a bank account in one day. In fact, we have this service, we help with it, when a foreigner can open an account in Georgia. And that's it. You work for yourself, you work with the whole world, you pay minimal, almost laughable taxes because up to a certain amount you simply don't pay them, just 1%. And that's basically it. You just work. Once you've grown, at first it's more, then there's VAT, but that's another story.
Thank you. Interesting. About Turkey, about residence permits. Here things aren't as good and rosy as we would like. Because the migration policy in Turkey is changing. Unfortunately, it hadn't changed for a long time. It just didn't change. Since 2023, which is a bit disappointing for us because getting a residence permit here has become a more expensive pleasure. More expensive means a cadastral value of $200,000. The cadastral value here is usually lower than the market value. And there have to be certain criteria for the property as well. The property must be a single unique object. And in particular, you can actually spend, let's say, from 100 to 150,000 euros. We have such cases where people obtain a residence permit based on purchasing real estate. The residence permit is granted for 2 years and it is given to both spouses in a legal marriage and to minor children. But also, the residence permit does not grant the right to work. Again, if we want to work, that's a completely different story, involving work visas or starting your own business. But there is an opportunity to obtain Turkish citizenship. And these programs are actually very interesting. $400,000 in cadastral value, the purchase of any number of real estate properties, whether residential or commercial. The property is encumbered, and there are also certain criteria for the real estate. The property is encumbered for 3 years. You can rent out this property, sell it after 3 years, and keep your Turkish citizenship. You keep the citizenship. And by the way, also, some features of obtaining Turkish citizenship. When changing citizenship, you can change your first and last name. Well, just in case you want to. You were Ivan, now you're Ibrahim. Times are such now that you might need that. Thank you. About real estate, about the format of real estate. What does it look like? What kind of property? Because even within one country, the type of real estate, number of floors, etc., may differ. So that we have an idea of what kind of real estate is typical, what it looks like, what number of floors is usually preferred, how far the property is from the sea, whether there is a price difference depending on proximity to the sea, whether there is a price difference based on infrastructure, and what kind of infrastructure is directly available on the premises of complexes or houses, and so on. And regarding the interior finishing, we will come back to that question, specifically what this real estate looks like externally in Georgia.
Batumi, Georgia now has many new high-rises. Specifically, there is a lot of high-rise construction going on now, yes, mostly.
How many floors is that?
12, 20, 30. Yes, something like that. So, well, mostly it's 12, 10, 9, 15 floors, mainly, yes. There are a huge number of high-rises. Well, some, not a huge number, but some. But on average, that's about it, around 10 floors, give or take, yes. A bit higher, as I mentioned. All the real estate is modern. Mostly what has been built in the last 10 years looks very modern. It's just like New York, New York. A lot of people are really surprised. Construction starts right from the first line. There are practically no spots left on the first line. That's what Batumi looks like. As I said, there's a park. Then there's a road. And then the construction begins. Well, a roadway, right? So the sea is separated from the road by a park, and that's where the construction begins. So if you consider this line as the first, then from the first line, it naturally goes deeper inland. There is one, maybe two complexes that are right on the first line, but they are already completed and built. In one of them, you can still buy there's ongoing construction, and in the other you can buy a resale property. But in general, mostly that's how it is, right? So it's literally 200 to 250 meters from the sea if we're
talking about it. So am I right in understanding that the main location where foreigners are buying now is no longer the first line?
It's the first line. For us, it's the first line since it's forbidden to build on the beach. There's a ban, so this is the first line, right? So from the first line and further inland. Well, for us, the first line starts from the sea, right? It probably starts at about 250 meters. Well, there's a park, the law, maybe 300 meters. How big is the park?
It's a designated conservation area.
Yes. Well, maybe even more. The width of the park varies, right? Then the development begins and it goes deeper, deeper. Batumi is actually quite large. It goes deeper, well, I don't know, up to the mountains, right? But now they're developing further and further, meaning people used to buy closer, naturally, to the first line, and they still do. You can still buy properties practically on the first line. I was just talking about this. Actually, you can even buy on protected land. There are a couple of properties like that, yes, with a sea view. Naturally, the closer to the sea, the significantly more expensive it is. If you want to buy cheaply, you'll have to buy further back. Yes, and the recent trend is, of course, development already in the city center and so on.
A kilometer, a meter, but from the sea?
It could be 2 kilometers away, from 600 meters up to 2 kilometers. It's actually quite large. It doesn't just go straight. It also curves around. And some people even like that. There are also projects in the foothills, which are very beautiful, for example. But if we're talking about tourists and demand, the closer to the sea, the better, of course. And the demand keeps growing. Tourists, short-term renters definitely want it. Maximum proximity and the infrastructure of the complex. Now, this also applies to apartments. What kind of apartments are these?
Speaking of infrastructure, the gentleman said, what's on the territory of the complex?
Here, it's not quite like in Turkey. Our situations vary greatly, but at a minimum, what we have are simply houses without any infrastructure at all. Pools here are often, especially lately for cost-saving reasons, built on the roof. But these aren't really pools, they're more like jacuzzis. I don't know, you can't really call them full-fledged pools. Sometimes they're smaller, sometimes bigger, yes. There are a number of top-tier complexes that have their own outdoor pools, well, on the ground, but that's more of an exception. So our standard set of amenities is a reception, maybe a small fitness room, but that's not a given. A concierge, of course, an elevator, and that's basically it. Yes, that's all. But at the same time, there are many complexes with extensive infrastructure. It's a city, so there are pharmacies, supermarkets, and hospitals nearby. In other words, everything you need. There might not be much inside the complex itself. But again, it really varies a lot. Some are built on the Turkish model, We have a couple of complexes, a couple of options where you have everything. That includes courts, tennis courts, swimming pools, even a forest inside the complex. So that kind of thing exists too. It's just that if you want to buy for $30,000, you'll get, let's say, an apartment in a high-rise where there's only a reception desk. And maybe a rooftop pool, yes. But if you want and are ready to buy for $100,000, well, in our case, it's mostly in dollars, then you'll get the full infrastructure. That's why the prices that were there yesterday are completely different from today. So you choose based on your budget and your needs. There's no such thing as a gentleman's set like you have. Everything is very different here.
I'll tell you about our gentleman's set, Kolya, since we've brought it up, and then we'll get back to the finishing. We have a gentleman's set. That means these are always gated complexes with free parking. The parking is mostly open. There are options with gated parking, with underground parking, but that's less common. Barbecue areas are a must. A green area is a must, as well as children's playgrounds. Most often there are pools and generators. Unfortunately, there is a problem with power outages in Turkey. This is a nationwide Turkish issue that we are currently bravely dealing with. It is being resolved. There are additional options such as indoor pools, cinemas, hammams, and saunas. And lately we see that more of these options are being added. And regarding the distance from the sea, these gated and guarded complexes in Mersin are located not far from the sea. The typical offers that are new now, that are currently being built, and that buyers are considering are up to 500 meters from the sea. The beaches are sandy. There is no main road, there is a promenade, pedestrian only with no cars, and the main highways are already outside these complexes. So we call this road the D400. That is, you walk out along quiet, peaceful streets and reach the beach. This is in Mersin, Turkey. And
may I add an advantage here? Well, this is a battle, right? Yes. But on the other hand, we have parking spaces for sale, underground ones. So we actually have a problem with parking in general because a lot of people come by car. People come from Turkey, and since Georgians love vacationing here too, the city is full of cars. Sometimes you park wherever you can. Some areas have no parking at all, or only paid lots.
So there's a shortage of parking spaces.
That's obvious. At the same time, developers are selling parking spaces. And we have several successful cases, quite a few, not just one or two, but a whole series, where people are buying parking spaces. They used to cost from $9,000 or even $8,000. Well, I'll speak in dollars, yes. Now it's $15,000. So over a year and a half, the price has grown from $8,000 to $15,000, you see? Well, a little less, but still a good increase. And this is the best kind of rental, the very best, because you'll be getting a steady $100 a year.
You should invest in parking spaces.
Seriously, I have a colleague.
Are parking spaces sold separately?
They are sold separately, so there's a downside to that. But there's also a unique advantage. As an investor, you have the opportunity to make small investments, $8,000 or even $12,000. There are still some available on resale. Those parking spaces that someone bought, sometimes people buy them together with apartments, of course, but then people caught on and started buying them separately. But that's not the case everywhere. There's my favorite developer. It just happened that way historically, with whom we've sold a huge amount. And now he has a problem with parking because he built a massive, yes, a huge complex of buildings, enormous. He basically built an entire district in Batumi. Can you imagine? Can you? And there are no parking spaces at all, and he sells them. So it's actually a great investment. And by the way, he has all the infrastructure. There's a hammam in every building, a bowling alley, everything you could want. So when it comes to infrastructure, it's a bit of a controversial topic. It really depends on the developer and what they offer. A lot of people come to Batumi, and like I said, they want something for $30,000. Well, then...
So let's talk about how big of a problem parking really is. In Turkey, there's no such problem. In Mersin, at least. We're not talking about Istanbul. We're not talking about all of Turkey. We're talking specifically about Mersin. In Mersin, there are no problems with parking. But what could be the reason for that? For us, owning a car is an expensive luxury. Unfortunately, not every family has one. A car in Turkey is quite expensive. The taxes on them are high, and so not everyone can afford one. That's why basically developers are able to provide a certain number of parking spaces for about 90% of the apartments. And also, when people ask me if it's possible to buy a parking space, I have never in my life seen a document for that. A document of ownership for a parking space. And this is not a business. In Georgia, things are simpler with cars. There was a period of time when people would go to Georgia
For
a car, and even now.
they still go. And many people from Russia travel through the old Georgian road crossing into Georgia and Batumi. It's very convenient. Traveling with your family is very economical. You only pay for gas.
Since we've gotten to the topic of cars, can you come in your own car?
Yes,
How long can you stay?
I haven't driven my own car, so I can't say how long you can drive it there. But for sure, all the tourists drive, and for about a month, let's say, you can easily drive around on your own license plates. Russian plates are no problem. That's it. After some time, you need to re-register. And if you have a residence permit, you also need to re-register. But otherwise, in the summer, I use it without any issues. There are tons of cars with license plates from all over the world, just tons. So I would say it's not only, maybe not even mostly Georgian cars, although Georgians traditionally have a lot of cars and they buy them. It's an affordable, really quite affordable thing.
You can also enter Turkey. Foreigners can enter with their own car as well within their visa-free period, visa-free regime. Basically, for foreigners, it's 90 days within half a year. So during this period, they can enter and leave with their own car without registering it, of course, on their own plates. But if they get a residence permit, they can bring their own car. And without changing the plates, for example, Russian or Ukrainian ones. The most important thing is that they are a citizen of the country where the car is registered with those plates and of which they are a citizen. And for 2 years. Unfortunately, after that, people can't stay with that car and then they are forced to leave. And for half a year, neither they nor the car are allowed to stay. And most often I know of such cases, including among my own property owners, when they would go to Georgia, waited out there, spend time with themselves in their car. And after 6 months,
They'd come back. Amazing.
they'd come back.
Amazing. People usually take their wives out for a walk, but here they take their cars out for a walk. That's the first time I've heard of that.
In Turkey, you can only register it for the duration of your visa stay, which is 2 years for a residence permit. As for the apartments themselves, let's get back to the apartments. When it comes to apartments, there is a big difference here. First of all, I want to talk about the format in which real estate is delivered in the so-called gentleman's set. Mainly what is included, the quality of the finishing, what kind of finishes are provided, and which popular layouts are available. But for foreign real estate, there is a format such as studio apartments and apartments with 1, 2, or 3 bedrooms, which are referred to as 1+1, 2+1, 3+1. I guess you have the same kind of classification too, right? Which types of real estate formats do foreigners most often choose, or which do developers build, or does demand create supply for? What do they choose? In what kind of finish are properties most often delivered? What does good quality housing generally look like, and what does standard housing look like in Georgia and Batumi?
Yes. Well, first of all, foreigners. In Georgia, people perceive Georgia as a place where you need to buy cheaply. That's why foreigners like and have been buying studios for many years. But at the same time, that's the demand, right? But at the same time, when we talk about rental income, it's the 1-bedroom and 2-bedroom apartments that are sold and rented out. Why? Because the market is oversaturated with studios. Studios, of course, do get rented out, but huge competition leads to falling prices. That is, if we're talking about summer, everything is rented out, that's it.
And then they compete with hotels.
Yes. If we're talking about summer, everything is rented out. If we're talking about Batumi, you can definitely rent out year-round since it's a city, right? So studios don't rent out well year-round, but 1- and 2-bedroom apartments do. So as an investment recommendation, if you have the opportunity, buy a 1-bedroom and even better, a 2-bedroom apartment. That is, there are basically no 2- or 3-bedroom apartments, and they are in huge demand.
Developers don't build them.
Yes, because foreigners don't buy them, since foreigners want to buy cheaper options. Makes sense, right? So basically, developers usually have studios, 1-bedroom and 2-bedroom apartments in their portfolio. Every developer has these types available. Initially, when the price list comes out, then the cheapest options are the first to be snapped up. There are all sorts of finishing types. The number of finishing options in Georgia is quite large, and the names are such that a non-professional wouldn't be able to figure them out. Green frame, black frame, white frame, semi-green frame, and so on and so forth, if we put it in Russian terms to make it clear. But there is simply a black finish in
brickwork.
Yes, in brickwork. You can buy an apartment in brickwork with all the connections and utilities already installed. You can buy that kind as well. You can buy one with finishing too. You can buy one with finishing and furniture. that kind, right? So basically, any option is possible. You can get one ready for finishing. That's the price. If you want to buy the cheapest, you get the black one, but usually not concrete, although sometimes it is concrete. Again, with many developers, there's this black and white frame. That's what it's most often called. So it's not exactly bare concrete. For example, when you walk in, everything is already set up for you, like for the toilet. And sometimes there's even a toilet installed, or at least the plumbing for it. The plumbing is there, yes, but you still have to do everything else yourself. It's either plaster or concrete walls that need to be finished. So everyone means something different when they talk about and sell this kind of property, right? You really need to understand exactly what you're getting for your money. That's a peculiarity of Georgia because everyone does things their own way. The name might be the same, but inside it could be something completely different.
They might have put in something else entirely. But what about foreigners? Like, if I come as a foreigner to this country, it's hard for people. It's not even about the money. It's about
Comfort.
It's about comfort. It's about your time. You don't know where to go, how to demand quality, how to negotiate, or how to explain that the windowsill should be flush or stick out a little. That's where foreigners come in. They probably still buy with finishing, right?
Very often that's
The case. Or adventurers buy to finish.
I'll say it happens differently. And now I'll explain why. Foreigners most often do it this way. They often buy without finishing and then pay extra for the finishing. That's how it is. With the developer, at a certain stage, you can...
And the price?
It goes up. Finishing starts from $600, maybe again with furniture or without furniture.
$600 for what?
Per square meter, of course, yes. $700, $800, and so on. So it depends on what's included. If there's furniture, many apartments are delivered right down to plates, spoons, and everything else. The developer can do all that for you, you just have to pay. So there are 3 types. It turns out to be black and white.
Is there any option?
Yes.
Or can I have my own creative idea?
No. All developers offer options. For example, I was just offered this kind of finish and that kind. You choose from the color schemes. Well, in my case, it's gray or green. So, for example, you'll get painted walls, the floor will be finished, and there's always a suspended ceiling. Yes, that's their standard. Or you can buy it already furnished. Recently, as prices have gone up, the cost of finishing has also increased a lot. That's why, in this sense, investors often lose out. They buy without finishing, and then end up paying extra money later on. Yes. That is, at the time of purchase, you could buy at minus $200. This was the case pretty much everywhere.
So at the stage of buying property from the developer,
there is
an additional option to order the finishing right away.
That's the price list. This is how much you'll pay if you buy without finishing, roughly speaking. And this is how much you'll pay if you buy with finishing. Just turnkey, fully ready, with sofas, spoons, bowls, everything else, TV, appliances. Usually there are 3 prices, most often.
So when we went in...
When we're talking about Batumi, no, in Tbilisi. In Tbilisi, most often it's still the black and white frame.
That's still because Batumi is oriented towards foreigners.
Yes.
Since we've gotten to furniture and appliances, I'd like to know, if I buy an apartment with finishing from the developer, how much more money do I need to invest to furnish it with appliances and furniture? Textiles to get the apartment ready, let's say a 1+1 apartment with 1 bedroom.
Well, I might be a little off right now, so I think I looked at the price list just the other day. To buy furniture and appliances for a finished apartment with finishing. Sometimes there are packages, but with developers it's not a package, it's calculated per square meter. I think it's $250 per square meter. That's how it was, as far as I remember, furnishing.
Yes, furnishing.
But at our company, for example, we have a personal designer who creates design packages that, by the way, rent out very well. That's why sometimes we recommend, for example, buying with some kind of basic finishing, and then she does the design. Because the developer, one way or another, delivers a standard, right? And that's it. The whole building is ready for handover, yes, and then everyone posts these listings and...
It's the same
apartment, yes, it's the same finishing. The color is different, gray, green, whatever, so what? And the furniture is the same, everything. She comes in, she does it, so it's really cool. To invest, for example, to choose a studio apartment with some possibility for remodeling. The most profitable, of course, are 1-bedroom apartments with a small area. Because they rent out well, so you need a bedroom. It rents out well. Because I'll say it again, all year round, people, one child, two adults. You don't want to live in a studio. You want to live, yes, even adults sometimes clean up like that. You want to live in a bedroom so that you have a separate kitchen. That's why this is, of course, the ideal option. For example, once I managed to buy an apartment with a small area, and the configuration was such that they made 2 bedrooms, and that was just wow. That's top notch. It's top notch because there's nothing like that on the market. And
if it's in rough condition, in concrete, then it's an open layout. Am I right?
no, yes, if you do it yourself, you can remodel it. Inside the apartment, you can do whatever you want. They offer, yes, except for the load-bearing walls, of course. They offer some kind of layout. So if you do the finishing with them, they have a ready-made layout. But if you do it yourself, you can change this layout. Inside, as long as you don't change the load-bearing walls, go ahead, put up walls, these semi-transparent ones, go ahead, put them up.
Huge potential for creativity.
Yes. Isn't it like that for you? That's really how it is. So you choose, you always choose. But foreigners are afraid, as you rightly said, to design things themselves. That's why
Not a single thought that.
it's a scary thing.
Usually, yes. Many families get divorced during renovations. So if we also buy a little summer house by the sea, and then we have to renovate it, and it's even abroad,
Then that's difficult. For example, we have a designer. If there's a chance to show it now, I'll share the designs of finished apartments. It's a real masterpiece. It's a masterpiece. She even does studios. Here's our designer. She doesn't just do the design. Diana picks out the textiles, everything, absolutely everything. These are masterpieces. She paints her own pictures and personally hangs them in these apartments.
roughly. So for an average one-bedroom apartment, how much money do you need? At least approximately.
I'll give you actual cases later, yes, with the prices. We'll show the prices somewhere here, okay? So I don't mess up a little right now, okay? So that is beautiful. Yes, so it's accurate.
Why am I so surprised in such detail? Because, well, for me, this is a somewhat different topic.
Nonsense.
When I tell developers in Turkey that in other countries properties are rented out unfinished, that it's just bare brick, that you have to do the renovations yourself,
Yes.
and so what if it's cheaper? They ask, why do you sell it like that? They sell unfinished housing there. Because in Turkey, throughout the entire country, an apartment must be finished. Otherwise, it simply won't be approved for occupancy. And what does finished mean? That is a fully move-in ready apartment. Moreover, there is a kitchen set, and most often the kitchen set comes with a stone countertop and faucets. If the space allows, there is a dining island that separates the area. If there is an entryway, it includes a built-in closet. The bathrooms are fully tiled, with wall-hung toilets featuring bidet functions, sinks, cabinets, and mirrors. Showers also come with faucets, as well as towel warmers. I like to joke that everything is included in the bathroom except for the toilet brush. If there is a walk-in closet in 2+1 apartments, there is sometimes a walk-in closet. These are built-in wardrobes. There are also connections for air conditioners, meaning the locations for the air conditioners are already designated. And since Mersin is a gasified area, and there are even districts that are planned to be gasified in the future, developers most often already install heating radiators there. By the way, about heating,
It's very different. There is gas heating and there is air conditioning. So in each building, it's different.
can you choose this as well?
No, you don't get to choose that. It's just
Houses with gas or
without gas? Yes, yes, yes. So either boilers are already installed and planned for, or someone, that's exactly the opposite opinion. Some people say, I want a boiler so I can heat the place. Yes, and it's cheaper.
gas is cheaper.
Yeah, it's cheaper. But some people say, I'm afraid of gas.
That's their experience, and everyone understood.
So that's exactly why. And some people say, I want. So those who plan to live there year-round often choose gas heating. Those who plan to rent out or live there only in the summer choose air conditioning.
But why do foreigners most often choose us? Because basically these problems have been solved. And moreover, I'll say that people even choose apartments based on the type of finishing. That is, each developer creates a certain format of apartment with renovation. All the apartments are absolutely identical. The locations for the outlets are predetermined. The number and type of outlets are strictly specified in order to obtain the scan. First of all, you need a building permit and the document certifying the building's commissioning. All of this must be in place. the required number of outlets, wiring for electricity in the complex ceiling. Yes, maybe there aren't any chandeliers or lamps hanging there and so on. But for example, in the bathroom, there must be a minimum number of lighting fixtures, bulbs. They must be there. So a foreigner doesn't need to worry about it. This kind of problem doesn't exist. In other words, he just chooses. He liked the kitchen with the green backsplash. He, so to speak, takes it. In this complex, there are apartments because some people choose based on location, some choose the apartment itself, and some choose the infrastructure and lifestyle. That is, everyone is different. And there is a category of buyers who look at what's inside, how it is inside. For some, it's not that important. But nevertheless, it can always be easily transformed. So you have an apartment. Your task is to furnish it with furniture and appliances, and fortunately in Mersin, all of this is easy, simple, and inexpensive. Since we do this for our clients, I know exactly how much our clients spend. To fully furnish a one-bedroom apartment with furniture, appliances, air conditioners, textiles, dishes, and so on, depending on the brand or type of furniture they choose, it costs about 5,000 to 7,000 euros.
It's about the same for us. The same thing, very similar.
Similar.
Very much the same, yes.
In our case, yes, we help, but the client chooses for themselves, sits on the sofa, and so on. Yes, this can be done remotely, but if everything is fine, technically, of course, you need some technical specifications, some furniture details, photos, videos don't always convey the texture or quality, and people want to see that for themselves. It's resolved, everything happens very quickly. Up to a week, in other words, from 3 weeks, let's say, to a week, people can already move in. That is, moving in and purchasing an apartment, including the registration of ownership, can take up to 1 week. So here in Mersin, you can easily and quickly find yourself living a paradise life on the Mediterranean coast. Thank you. This was very informative for me.
It's popular. But again, right now they're giving me an apartment and it has finishing. I didn't mention furniture, it has finishing. A designer will work on it, meaning there will be plastering and painting. There will be walls, flooring, a suspended ceiling. In other words, unlike what you might be used to, the kitchen is almost never included. It's practically never part of it. There will be a bathroom, by the way, that's included in the finishing. And basically, the designer will come in, order the furniture, maybe even do some remodeling. Maybe, well, probably not in this apartment, but in general, so it really varies.
Kolya, we figured out what kind of property it is, what it looks like on the outside, and what the infrastructure is like. I suggest we move on to an interesting topic. How much does it cost? How much? Give it to me in grams. How much do different types of apartments cost, just to make the calculations easier? Can we talk about the prices as they're usually sold without finishing? So if I say how much the apartments cost, the answer will be the apartment costs this much. Is that in shell and core, or will it be
in shell and core? Shell and core.
And on top of that?
On top.
Roughly, how much more do you need to add per thousand?
60 to 70%. Well, roughly speaking, to that price. For example, a studio apartment now costs from $38,000 to $43,000. Finished.
Dollars.
Finished, right? But that will be a bare shell. To bring it up to standard, it will be $65,000. $55,000 to $65,000.
And what about a one-bedroom apartment, if I want it finished?
80 at least. That's the real price in a good new building, finished turnkey with furniture. Because usually if it's finished, it's never without furniture. Most often it's with furniture. 80,000 probably is the starting point. Well, 75 there.
2 plus 1?
Rare indeed, yes. Well, 100 plus. 100 plus. 100
plus.
Well, definitely 100 plus.
Yeah, that's right.
Prices have risen. That is, if we are talking about the fact that we have real estate from maybe $38,000, well, this is a black frame. Well, this is concrete.
What are the lowest prices? So if I want to get into something like this, how can I buy an apartment in Georgia with a small amount of money? How much money do I need to have?
I will tell you. For example, right now I have a studio apartment, a resale, for instance, from my client who bought it earlier, and now he wants to sell it. He finished building his house and wants to sell, so it's already available. This is an apartment without finishing. You can make it into a one-bedroom. This is exactly the kind of option where you can invest in it really well from the perspective of... You can remodel it a bit, yes, even though it's a studio. You can easily make a separate bedroom out of it. It's unfinished. $55,000. Well, this is right in the first line. It's really good. All right then, so if
we're not talking about some one-off case, meaning it's here today, gone tomorrow, maybe by the time viewers watch this video, you've already sold it. If we're talking about some kind of package from developers, let's say, where we can say there's a selection, as many as you need, do you have to pay the full amount, the 100% cost up front?
a black frame starts from 37. On Pristel, it's 37, 38, 39. Well, sometimes from the developer, it's even a bit over 40. So this is at the
pre-foundation pit stage?
Yes, yes. Well, from 40, let's say, just to be honest with everyone, because prices aren't going down, they're going up. That's it. From 40, that's for a black frame, a small apartment. 38, 42, 45.
Is that the price for the full cost?
Yes.
The full cost?
In installments.
How long is the installment plan?
For the duration of construction, sometimes even post-handover, a bit longer. How much
does it take in terms of time?
3 for 3 years. 2.5, 3.5 years.
Is it an interest-free installment plan?
Interest-free.
How much is the first payment?
30%.
Those definitely are wonderful terms.
You can apply for and obtain a mortgage. Once the construction is fully completed.
A mortgage for foreigners?
Yes. This is a really cool thing in Georgia, yes. A foreigner, including Russians. Almost any foreigner, a Russian as well, can also get a mortgage, usually in the last month, yes. We arrange mortgages for completed housing. Please note, for completed housing. So often the formula is like this.
Not for construction?
Not for construction. For now, the formula is often like this. The developer says that before the construction is finished, you have to pay 50 to 70%. Less than that is rare. 50 to 70% before the construction is finished. Not the whole amount. And when you get the keys, you have to pay, for example, 30 to 40%, right? And these 30 to 40% you can take out as a mortgage.
What documents are needed?
Well, they require some documents. An income statement, they require... But in fact, none of this can really be proven. Basically none, I would say. That is...
The formal ones that they can provide themselves?
Yes, yes. And here there is another very significant nuance. There are two types of mortgages. For secondary housing, just ready-made, and a mortgage from the developer, which the developer coordinates with the bank. That is, the developer most often builds projects using borrowed money. And when the bank gives them this loan, it is interested in the project being completed, and it is interested in getting its money back. And when the developer acts as a guarantor for the bank, a surety, then such a loss is easy to take.
How many percent? 10?
Well, I rounded it off a lot, from 8 to 12.
What currency? 10?
Dollar.
How many years do they give up to?
10 to 15 years old, not very many for foreigners. Well, 10 years is definitely a good term.
It's a good term, nevertheless. Well,
it's possible. I mean, we used to do such cases, multiple cases. There was a time when properties cost, 35 with finishing included. Yes, and we did it so that people could buy a property with a mortgage and pay with the rental income. It's honestly impossible to pay off this mortgage now. You'll have to pay extra, but you can partially get your money back. The average mortgage payment, just off the top of my head, starts at $600. So at a minimum, it's $600 to $700.
That's not much.
That's the minimum payment. So up to $1,000. We even have a table where, for different countries around the world, we know there are developers in Cambodia. I'll just jump ahead here. There's a 10-year installment plan from the developer with interest after construction is completed. And the payment is $500. So that's also available on the market.
If a client wants to buy real estate in Georgia, but either doesn't have or doesn't want to use their own funds, can you help with a mortgage? Or is that a separate matter? Well,
pay 50%.
Okay.
Yes, of course we can help. If it's a finished property, yes, of course we handle that.
How many percent?
10. Well, I rounded it off a lot, from 8 to 12.
What currency?
Dollar.
How many years do they give?
Up to 10, up to 15 years for foreigners. Not very many. Well, 10 years for sure.
Good time, nonetheless.
Well, you can... So before, we used to do such cases, multiple cases, when properties cost, 35. With finishing, there was a time like that, right? Yeah. And we arranged it so that people could buy a property with a mortgage and payments and cover that mortgage with rental income. Now, honestly, that's impossible. You'll have to pay extra. But you can partially get your money back. The average mortgage payment, just off the top of my head, starts at $600. So the minimum is about $600 to $700.
Not much.
That's the minimum payment. So up to $1,000. We even have a table like that, where for different countries around the world, we know there are developers in Cambodia. I'll just jump ahead here by 10 years. From the developer, there's an installment plan with interest after construction is finished, right? And the payment is $500. So that's also available on the market.
If a client wants to purchase real estate in Georgia, but either doesn't have or doesn't want to use their own personal funds, can you assist them in securing a mortgage loan? In this case, you have to provide the following documentation.
50%.
Okay.
Yes, of course, we can help. If it's a finished property, yes, of course, we handle that.
So
not only
sales, but also financial instruments.
Of course. But it's not a simple process, I want to say. It depends on the stage. Sometimes it's easier. But just now, TBC, which is the largest bank in Georgia, announced that they're offering it again. That is, sometimes they offer it, sometimes they don't.
The market changes, so you have to keep your finger on the pulse.
Yes, but overall, this opportunity exists, and we have plenty of cases like that. It's a complicated process, complicated, but it's possible. Especially when the developer, as I mentioned, provides guarantees and wants to sell the properties that are ready. That is, there should be an elevator installed. The bank only gives a loan to an individual when the building has been commissioned. The elevator is operational, the elevator is installed, there is a certain type of finishing, the exterior of the building must meet certain standards. In other words, there must be specific documents. At that point, you can take out a mortgage for a finished property. Some people even take out a mortgage for renovations. That happens too. For example, you paid those same 45 or 55, right? Well, for the apartment. And then you took out a mortgage for the renovation. That also happens at the bank.
That's an amazing story. Considering that there is a very good, in my opinion, financial instrument, I will tell you what financial instruments are available in Turkey.
And
in my opinion, this is a very good financial
cool instrument. Not everyone knows about it, by the way. And not everyone gets involved in this, agencies included. We really fight for these mortgages, but we do get them.
Well, of course, it's easy, simple. When a person has money, you just process it and that's it. It's a whole process.
And people, for some reason, not everyone understands that this is very profitable. Because if you buy a finished apartment and you take out a mortgage, then basically 50% of your monthly payment, let's say your payment is $600 to $700, you will definitely recoup 50% of that, $300 a month. You'll get that back.
And the apartment is owned by you in this case?
Yes, of course.
Just
with no encumbrances?
Of course, only that way. Excellent. In this regard, in your opinion, right now, what stage is the market in Georgia, in Batumi, at? Is it growing, overheated, or undervalued? What is it?
It's complicated. I'll tell you why. It's complicated. I can't say that it's overheated. It's very complicated.
When I started looking into these topics, I thought that it was cheaper in Georgia. For some reason, I had the impression, some kind of opinion, that it used to be
cheaper.
I missed that moment.
Not anymore. We can see from the numbers that it's not. It's not cheaper now. And the whole point is in the finishing, as you've already realized, right? Because really, when we just mentioned the numbers,
it sounds nice.
Well, it's true. We're not lying, right? It's just that you have to add the finishing to that.
Well, Turkey also has its own little tricks. I'll tell you about them now.
Well, let's talk about the market. Look, right now it's very advantageous. Some developers have special conditions where, for example, you can get in with 0 down payment. Don't faint, yes, it's with a long installment plan, you know. So you pay about $1,000, essentially building up your own capital, because any apartment is capital. In Batumi, prices will definitely go up. Let me digress a bit and say that global brands have entered Batumi. Well, not literally today, but already since yesterday, yes, global brands. Amar has entered Batumi. Others are now going to build Trump Tower in Tbilisi. Just the other day, I read about it in the news. So huge investment holdings are entering Batumi and also Belize. That's why, from this point of view, these are undervalued markets. But many people, out of old habit, want to buy for $30,000. And that's the problem. There's nothing left for $30,000 anymore.
Well, people like me who just woke up one day and thought, that wouldn't be a bad idea.
And so everyone is walking around looking. And people are looking at the secondary housing market. You can find some property there, well, not for 30, of course, but for 38, 45, 55. Very...
Are you feeling worn out?
Will it be? No, it won't be worn out at all. It might be without finishing too. So it won't be worn out. You just have to pay the money up front.
But
the cargo market is different in that not many people want to pay the money up front. So you have to choose. Either you buy on the secondary market. And only in our company, by the way, are there ready-to-move-in properties available with installment plans. Ready-to-move-in properties. From
the developer?
From us.
From you.
Can you imagine? That's what we have. How do you do that? It's very simple. For example, we had clients who bought 3 years ago. They bought at a good price. The prices were a bit different back then. Now they're ready to sell. And in order to compete with the developer who offers installment plans, we agreed with them that they would also offer installment plans. You have to hunt for such lots, but for a year or two, we can always find properties at good prices. Well, I'm talking about $45,000 without finishing.
We're talking in dollars.
In dollars, only dollars. With a 2-year interest-free installment plan, you see? Ready to move in. You do. I'll tell you, I have personal cases like that. I've even done this myself. It's not even flipping. I don't even know what to call it. So I realized that's how the market works. And I tried to buy up apartments at good prices when the opportunity arose, yes, and then resell them on installment plans. Basically, taking advantage of my own investment leverage. It's very interesting. And it's very interesting for the client and for the person who's buying as well. So you can buy from the developer. We recommend buying. Only new housing, whether with an installment plan or not, but only new. Buying a secondary apartment as is, with grandmas living there, absolutely not. You can't do anything with it at all. The property must have a reception, a management company, absolutely essential. After all, it's all an investment. Even if it's for yourself, you still want someone to look after it, air it out, and so on and so forth. Now, they're building according to different standards, so it's only new housing, either ready from an investor or from the developer. So make your choice.
Well, I have been there, of course, and I know about the old housing stock. I lived there for several years. In Batumi, maybe something has changed, but the old housing stock...
No, that's not even
up for discussion.
Well, actually, we do get requests for old housing stock. It's just that when someone comes in wanting something for 29 to 33, that's the kind of quality you get. I mean, you can probably find it on the market. That is to say,
you won't get any pleasure from the purchase.
No pleasure from buying it or from using it afterwards. Absolutely no enjoyment at all. So objectively, you really should buy new housing in Batumi, of course.
You have very good financial conditions in Georgia and Batumi. Let me tell you about the financial instruments available in Turkey. I can't boast such interesting offers, but I can boast about the prices. Because if all the conditions were like that, then of course the prices would be different. I'll talk about the prices right away. Apartments, studios. I wouldn't say this is a mass market, I just have a certain pool. Apartments on exclusive terms from the contractor. A turnkey studio apartment starts from 33,000 euros. A one-bedroom apartment, again with finishing, is 40,000 euros. From 40 to 50, we can find a very good selection of apartments. And I want to emphasize that these are not necessarily from the developer, and in fact they are not from the developer. Let me put it this way, these are not from the developer. I have the opportunity to offer such prices because I've been working in the market for a long time and have access to interesting deals. All of these are new apartments from contractors, from certain investors, and so on. There are 2+1 apartments which are in demand here. They start at 60,000 euros. Speaking of financial instruments, foreigners cannot get mortgages. It's just not possible. That's how it is now. It's been this way for many years. Even Turkish citizens themselves face significant difficulties in obtaining a mortgage. That's why 60% of Turkey's population does not own their own home. They rent apartments because mortgages in Turkish lira are calculated based on the cadastral value. The cadastral value is underestimated. And due to inflation, there was a period recently when the annual rate in Turkish lira was 90%. That sounds terrifying.
Terrifying.
It sounds terrifying. That's why people either take out a mortgage fully aware that yes, they're doing it for a short period of time. But overall, I would say that this is not common practice. There is no such practice. From time to time, Turkey has special offers, let's put it that way, if you can say that about the government. Because about 5 years ago, they had a program called state mortgage at 1% per month. 12% annually? That's really impressive. During that period, a huge number of apartments were bought. Everyone who wanted to, and even those who didn't want to bought them, then couldn't pay. And as a result, a massive number of apartments that couldn't be paid for through the mortgage flooded the market again. But in general, we're only talking about apartments bought with real, actual money. There are offers from developers. Developers offer installment plans, interest-free for the duration of construction. But the construction period here is short, usually about 2 years. So developers can typically offer a 50% down payment and an installment plan for a year and a half, and most often up to 2 years, interest-free. That's it. Upon completion of construction, a certificate of ownership is issued. Well, these are the only tools we have, and that's why the prices are different. If we're talking about buying from a developer, you can find one-bedroom apartments starting at probably 50,000 euros. Of course, that's with finishing included. And as for studio apartments, until last year, or let's say even until 2024, there simply weren't any studio apartments of this format in Mersin at least. Right now, there are no more than 6 complexes in Mersin that have studio apartments. Why is that? They look like commercial real estate and they can be rented out short-term by the day. In Turkey, the rental conditions are quite complicated, so studio apartments are not suitable. They are not suitable for a residence permit, not suitable for registration, but they are suitable for short-term rentals. All other residential apartments for a residence permit, if the budget allows for registration, but not for short-term rental. These are the nuances. This is the kind of financial leverage involved. A significant difference.
A different market. It would seem so, right?
It seems like they're neighbors,
right? Yes, they're completely different, at totally different stages. Yes, that's fine.
About property ownership? How is it processed? How difficult is it for a foreigner? Is the ownership document issued to a Georgian citizen any different? For a foreigner, the cost of registration for a Georgian citizen and a foreigner is different. The procedure, how complicated is it? Are there any special permits? Can all foreigners buy? Can they buy everywhere? What are foreigners not allowed to buy? If such restrictions exist, how much does it cost? In other words, obviously, we won't list separately how much the taxes are and so on. That's a whole separate topic. In general, how much extra money should you prepare for registering ownership? And since we're talking about expenses, will there be any other fees? I don't know, commissions besides the government ones? We're registering an apartment in Georgia.
Yes, I'll answer. It's all very simple. I won't go into a long explanation. So here I am.
I've been asking the question for longer.
You can register in the state registry in 5 minutes. There are private registries. My apartment was registered through a private registry. You come in, there's a state registry, but there is also, the registration itself can be done through a private registry. The developer comes, you set a date, and the developer arrives with the full set of documents.
What's a private registry?
Well, I can't explain it to you any other way than I already have. A private registry? Yes. So these are registrars, so to speak? Yes. There is a state registry, but you can also register.
So are there some government officials involved?
Well, probably. I can't say exactly how it's organized internally, but I just know that you can go to the state registry. But when you're a respected foreign citizen and you only have 2 days and you don't want to stand in lines and so on, you get scheduled in advance, you arrive at a specific address, go to a wonderful office, approach a smiling young woman with the developer, and in 5 minutes you sign. The management contract is mandatory as well as the ownership contract. That's it. You pay at that point, from $30 to $100.
Oh, I'll have some water.
Yes.
That's all.
That's where it all ends. Nothing else at all. I don't even know what else to talk about. That's it.
So did they give you a certificate of ownership?
It's a purchase and sale agreement registered in the registry, stating that you are the owner.
So by showing this paper, I can say, look, yes,
this is ownership. They just don't have, like in Russia, a piece of paper. By the way, in Russia now, there isn't such a certificate of ownership either. Actually, no, I registered an apartment in Russia not that long ago, and there was nothing either. It's just a purchase and sale agreement with a stamp, registered, showing that the developer sold it to you. That's all.
I'm rethinking it again.
So it's free. It's just for the paperwork. They charge you money. But in private cases, maybe up to $100, you'll pay. I don't even know what it is today. 70, 30 to 70. That's it. It never costs more.
Cool.
It takes 5 minutes. But you have to agree on it. And no difference.
The ownership right
of the foreigners and the legal rights of ownership
of citizens
are treated absolutely equally. That's a huge advantage. So you can't, people often ask me, well, will they take it away from Russians? I say, are you serious? You're listed in the registry in exactly the same way. There's no such thing as your passport being a different color, red or blue. Absolutely. You're just as much a citizen, yes. So it's absolutely unified. Citizens can only buy agricultural land. That's it. Everything else is allowed, no problem.
Cool. Thank you. It's more complicated in Turkey, so we immediately tell clients to prepare money for the paperwork as well. Over the past 5 years, let's say, there has been an evolution of taxes. They keep making things more and more complicated, including the procedures. So realtors know exactly what they're working for, and to be fair, they earn their pay honestly, because both the bank and the cadastral chamber are involved. Basically, it doesn't take long either. It takes from 2 to 5 business days, depending. It depends on how busy the cadastral chamber is and the property registration process. The property registration is issued as a document, which we call tapu. By the way, the tapu specifies the plot of land under the house, and it does not differ from documents issued to a Turkish citizen or a foreign citizen. But the procedures and processes, let's say, for registration are the same for all foreigners and different for Turkish citizens. For Turkish citizens, it's cheaper. They pay the cadastral fee and the tax. 4% of the cadastral value. Foreign citizens also pay 4% cadastral fee, plus additional documents, bank certificates, and so on. But overall, if we're talking about everything, including the presence of a sworn translator, which is mandatory, it's about 3,000 euros. Be prepared to pay government taxes and fees for property registration. This is paid in a single payment when purchasing real estate. It depends on the cadastral value, meaning the higher the cadastral value, the more expensive the registration will be. When we talk, of course, about Turkish citizenship or residence permit, as I already mentioned, the amount is $200,000 for a residence permit, $400,000 for citizenship, and a 4% tax. You have to pay this amount. So yes, you really feel it here, the registration process.
I want to go a bit deeper just to clarify. You can complete the process in 5 minutes, but you receive the document the next day or later. That's why they often go through private chambers to speed things up. Well, I mean, the document, the contract. Either it stays with the developer or you wait a day and they give you the actual paper the next day or the day after. The paperwork takes 5 minutes, but they hand it over later. They process everything in the registry, register it a bit later, and then give it to you. This is called the registrar. And I also wanted to mention that as an additional fee, the only thing that comes up is that meters are processed separately, right?
Well, that's all post-sale. We also have to pay for that. I really appreciate you providing the information concerning the necessary paperwork.
So there is a difference.
I see. Also, as I mentioned, foreign citizens cannot buy land in Turkey. There was a period when it was allowed, but now it's prohibited. So yes, you buy apartments. With land, you can buy a villa. Even if you buy an apartment, it's the
same.
So you can, of course, it naturally includes the surrounding land. But yes, there is a very substantial difference.
Well, let's see what happens next.
Taxes and expenses are basically for maintenance. So we've bought it. Congratulations. What's next? How expensive is it to own property in Georgia? What will the annual property taxes be? What will the utility payments be? These taxes differ from country to country. In our case, in Turkey, it's called aidat. Somewhere else, it's called utilities. In different countries, it's called differently. But the point is that your property should be clean and everything should be well maintained. How much does this cost? As a percentage, what does it depend on? And how expensive is it to own an apartment in Georgia?
It's almost free.
That's good to hear.
Look, it used to be completely free. Now, 2 years ago, they made a new law. Not made, but how should I say, introduced it. That's probably the right word. And it's a complicated calculation. It's even hard for me to explain it now because it took everyone a long time to figure it out. In short, this is how it works.
With taxes, it's always like that, so that nobody
gets it.
The whole point.
Property tax. So here's how it works. You must disclose all of your global assets, Vaji, as well as your family's income. You fill out the relevant documents before November. By November, you have to do all this every year. If your total family income, I've written it down here, is up to 40,000 lari, then you are exempt from the tax. If your family income, what you wrote down, you write this, you understand, right? If your family income is more than 100,000 lari, then you pay from 0.5% up to 1%. The tax authorities calculate it, but that's still very little. I mean, 0.5. That is to say,
That is in money. How much will I
pay in money? $100 per year? Per year. Maybe $50. Maybe you're exempt from taxes, but if you declare that you have a ton of income, I just haven't seen people like that. Maybe, I guess it could be a lot. They'll check. Will they check? What will they check? How will they? I don't even understand what they would check at all for a foreigner. Well, that's just how it is.
basically?
Either they don't pay at all, are exempt, or it's up to $100. So that's basically it. The income tax, that's a property tax. By the way, it didn't even exist before. I'll say it again. It's only been around for 2 years. And the tax, they're tightening it up a bit now. And the income tax, meaning if you rent out an apartment, it's from 5 to 20%. There was a huge reform from 5 to
20.
Yes, depending on how and through whom you rent it out. I won't go into detail right now because, again, this is a law from April of this year or March. Well, I mean, now it's April, March, right? So I won't go into it. I just listened to an entire lecture on this topic, so of course I can't explain it all, but that's a separate subject. In short, from 5 to 20, if you rent it out through an agent and do everything properly, then you'll pay tax on your income, 5% of your income. Well, from renting it out, that's what really interests me. But up to 20% if you have the wrong management company. That is, if you use certain wording and so on. This is really something brand new. So whoever listens to us will be the owner of new information. That's why it's very important here to choose the right management company and do everything properly. And we can give advice. And here I want to add a little.
The developer is not the management company. The developer is
Not the management company. There is always one in most cases, but the quality does not always meet expectations. That is, in most cases, those we work with are also the management companies. Some developers, my friends, since they sold a lot, sometimes even pay extra out of their own pockets so that people have income and no expenses. But at the same time, if a private, competent management company takes over the same apartment and does a redesign, let me emphasize again, do you remember the beginning of our conversation? Cookie cutter or something interesting. You can earn good money, but that's another question. We'll answer it later, right? About renting.
For all this beauty to work, what is he paying for? Is it paid separately? Does it depend, like in Russia, on the square meter? It depends.
Does it?
On the number of registered residents? On the infrastructure? What does it depend on? Utility payments?
Utility payments. Water, electricity. We won't talk about that now.
About the same
As in Russia. The field of management, it really varies quite a lot. For the first time, I encountered expensive reception, elevators,
lighting.
Depends on the infrastructure. For the first time in my life, I came across expensive management. The first time. Usually management isn't very expensive. Usually it can be $400 a year, depending on the area. A studio, a 1-bedroom, a 2-bedroom.
Areas vary.
Yes, on the area. And for some, it's calculated per square meter. It's included directly in the management fees. For others, it's by studio or 1-bedroom. So it varies from one management company to another, but it's usually not expensive. I mentioned the annual figures, but there is a management company, mine is like that, which costs $1,000 per year.
Per year.
That's considered very expensive, even more so.
What do they do for that money?
They have a large infrastructure, but it rents out well, so it pays off that way.
That's a provocative question. Are the elevators paid?
No, only in Orbi. If you buy an Orbi, be prepared. That's Orbi, that's exclusive. Everything else.
That's my personal experience. That's
exclusive. As many times as I've been to Georgia, I haven't been to Orbi. I've never used the elevators, never lived there, so I haven't seen paid elevators anywhere except in Orbi. You've probably been to Orbi, right?
I guess I have been, but I was really amazed.
That's only in Orbi, it's their own know-how.
All right then, let me take a moment to tell you all about Mersin. About the tax. The general taxes in Turkey for owning real estate. They are annual, paid usually in 2 installments, May and November, but most people pay everything in May. They're not burdensome at all. It depends on whether the city is large or not. In our case, the city is large, Mersin, with 2 million residents. It's 0.2% of the cadastral value. The cadastral value, I want to emphasize that it's very different from the market value. If we talk in actual numbers, in money, my property owners pay 500 to 700 Turkish lira. If we convert that to euros, it's about 10, maybe up to 20 euros per year in taxes. Owning real estate, owning property, the expenses are called aidat here. This is aidat, which means utility payments. I want to emphasize that this includes everything. And swimming pools, garbage removal, by the way, in Turkey, it's customary for the trash to be picked up right next to your home, right by your apartment. Swimming pools, generators, parking lots, children's and sports playgrounds. The richer the infrastructure, the higher your aidat will be. So there is a certain budget for this, for the maintenance of the complex. There is a management company that divides, regardless of the square footage, it's simply divided by the number of apartments. So for example, if a complex has a 1-bedroom apartment and a 3-bedroom apartment, the aidat will be the same for both, because I emphasize it's divided by the number of apartments. There are annual payments and there are monthly payments. It depends. If the complex has a lot of foreigners who come strictly during the season, then it is accepted that they pay for a year. There are cases when most often it is monthly in Turkish lira. 2,000 lira, 2,000 lira. That's a little less than 50 euros per month. And the most expensive in my complexes, well, that's about 700 to 800 euros per year. That's for 5 pools, a water park, and a private beach. For tennis courts, a hammam sauna, and so on. These are the annual fees. So it's actually not a burden either in principle. These are the kinds of expenses we have for owning real estate. Colleague, we
are on the same page in this regard.
Yes, it's hard to compete here. About renting. Since we've already started talking about renting, what types of rentals are there? That is, long-term, short-term, or daily rentals, because the legislation is also tied to this here. What taxes have already been mentioned? I'll tell you what taxes there are in Turkey. And who rents, in which season, maybe if we consider real estate as a tool, as a way to make money, what kind of rental would you choose? Who is responsible for this?
Please tell us how it works in Georgia.
This is a very interesting question, and also a very sensitive one on the one hand, because many people buy for rental purposes, and it's not always that simple. People buy the cheapest property, even though renting it out for maximum profit is the goal. That's not how it works. Let me start with the numbers. On average, the realistic rental figures are as follows. 6 to 8% annual return on the invested funds. Those are realistic numbers. But here's the question. What exactly did you invest in, right? So that is, and so on. But on average, these are the numbers across the board, right? If you get up to 10%, that's the maximum. It never goes higher. Everything else is a lie. Well, 10% is really, that's just incredibly lucky, right? So 6 to 8, maybe 9%. So I've given you the numbers. But if you expect that you'll just buy some apartment, rent it out, buy a studio, and suddenly everything will take off for you. No, well, of course, you'll rent something out, the season will be rented. But the season, as we said, is 3 months, $300, right? So you got $900 and that's it, so to speak, right? That's why now I've created, I believe, a very proper and honest attitude toward people. I have management companies that I trust a lot, elite management companies, by the way. These guys from St. Petersburg are doing an amazing job. Well, it doesn't matter. They take on all the real estate. Yes, those who live in Georgia, who have set up their own laundry service. They rent out properties incredibly well. They inspect the apartments. They know exactly what needs to be done to make them rentable, and we select properties specifically for them. So, for example, I have several property management companies around me, several of them, yes. And the general approach, taking into account changes in legislation, as I mentioned, is that now in Batumi, the tax authorities are starting to pay attention. Previously, no one paid attention to income taxes at all. No one paid them. Honestly, no one even looked at them. Now the situation is changing. So you have to, well, they're even starting to knock on doors now. These are just the very first warning signs. Yes, so everything needs to be done officially. You need to pay officially, and then everything will be okay. These guys, so you can contact us with a request. If you have a sufficient budget, that is not 30,000, I repeat again, not for 30,000. You're just buying an apartment for yourself, which will somehow be rented out. You
buying a treehouse doesn't guarantee it's rented.
So the minimum price currently on the market for a shell and core is $36,000. That's the minimum price. Well, for more or less decent real estate, but that would be a studio.
Do hotels stop apartment rentals? No, not at all.
Do they compete with apartments?
It is certainly true that if you have a studio and a hotel room, then that's direct competition. That's why Batumi is about family vacations. You need to understand that clearly. Family vacations, above all. Casinos aside, hotel guests don't matter. We focus on renting to families. They come, as you said, for the summer or a few months to live with their children. It's convenient and affordable, cheaper than Sochi and elsewhere too. It's the cheapest. Israelis come here. In Israel, families too. 2, 3, 4 children, yes, or even more. So naturally, they need an apartment with at least 1 or 2 bedrooms, and there's a waiting list for such apartments. Villas are not very common. They exist, but they're more of an exception, really, just a handful. So that's why I've mentioned the average rent, I've mentioned the expenses, and I'm saying that if there's a request, you can contact me. I will do the calculation directly with the management company, and we will provide a detailed breakdown. If someone genuinely wants to buy and has enough budget, we won't do it just for the sake of it. But if a person comes with a budget, really ready to invest, let's say they have at least around $100,000, so they can actually get an apartment with finishing, then we can talk about a good rental yield. I said, and I'll tell you straight, everyone who claims they're getting a 15% annual rental yield, it's all a lie. There is no such rental yield.
Vows aren't marriage.
Yes, net income. No one pays that kind of money in any country in the world.
How much does a management company cost?
There are 3 options for renting. I didn't mention short-term, mid-term, and long-term, depending on the season. Mostly rentals are handled through a management company for short-term and mid-term stays. Mid-term means from a month and up. Short-term is a week or 2. There are no restrictions on renting. Go ahead and rent it out. So basically, the management company usually takes 30% if they handle the rental income.
Can individuals rent out the property themselves?
Of course, absolutely.
Free?
At all, no problems. There's no license required. As of today, this is not regulated. And
in general, is real estate activity licensed in Georgia?
No, not yet, but they're moving in that direction. People are talking about it now. There are realtor associations, but the activity itself is not licensed. That's why there are so many companies that open and then quickly close. If we work there, well, how long has it been? I've already been investing in this market for 5 years. I know everyone who hasn't built yet and everyone who has built as well. I have a lot of experience. There are a lot of fly-by-night companies, as always. They are not licensed. For example, we say that we have a lawyer on staff because it's really important to thoroughly check the documents. And the contracts with developers that clients sign during the initial purchase also need to be carefully reviewed. Yes, and it's even more important when it comes to secondary sales. That's why this is so important.
I really liked the presentation by the management company because in reality, with any property, especially abroad, this is a real pain point.
It's a pain. Because
everyone dreams about it. Many want to rent out their property, but few do so effectively.
Developers say, we rent properties, and everyone shows pretty numbers. But in real life, it doesn't work that way. No one understands that what you're promised and what actually happens are worlds apart. And I've seen this so many times, all over the world, and it's the same in Georgia in particular.
You recommend and, let's say, take responsibility for renting out only to Antoine Senez, Perret, and we are responsible for those whom
we have taught these lessons.
Clients only.
Because we know what needs to be bought in order for it to be rented out. Specific complexes, paradoxical as it may seem, targeted complexes. By the way, yesterday I participated in an analytics meeting with my management company. They held a big meeting, yes, and they are expecting a very large increase in tourists this year. Very large increase.
Why is that?
First of all, the number of flights from Russia has tripled. Direct flights are being launched from certain dates. Direct flights, right? Not direct, but regular flights. Sorry, that I used the wrong word. Now, there are also direct regular flights. And besides that, there are many other factors. They are really expecting a super season. Well, we'll see what actually happens. Because for the previous 2 years, honestly, they were pessimistic. It was fine. Everything depends on what you bought. So there are cases here, for example, even in Orbi, paradoxical as it may seem, a properly photographed and well-furnished apartment rents out well, even though Orbi as a whole doesn't rent out well. Well, the lowest end is really low when it comes to renting out, so everything is, of course, very individual. They have a dedicated designer. Our designer, for example, is also a designer, including Sanya. The designers who work for them know everything there is to know about their needs. But I don't take on that kind of responsibility myself. I also have property management companies. I know there are complaints, and you know what else is important? Reporting, because it's about money. It's about your spouse. You understand. And it's like they want to be paid even before and to be paid on a specific day.
You can't check it?
Yeah, you can't check it. I
Trust, you could.
But we have everything. We have calendars. So I'm not just recommending it. I'm telling you what I understand from working in this market. It's really very important.
Professionals need this.
Yes, but honestly, you really had to search for them. And it's very difficult because, as I said before, you can buy anything, but what you can actually do with it is another matter. You can say that you'll invest 2 million, but what are you going to do with it afterwards?
I won't buy it without a handle.
Either one is fine.
Let me tell you how things are here in Turkey in Mersin. Here, things are a bit stricter when it comes to rentals. Well, first of all, our activities are licensed. And by the way,
it's key.
Yes, licensed. I'm a specialist. I remember taking the exams. I have a card with an expiration date, and it can be revoked. If any activity is improper, this is very important. For renting out apartments, there are also 3 types of rentals. Long-term is a year or more. Short-term is usually 100 days to 3 months, and daily rental. For long-term rentals, the owner can rent it out themselves. The contract is done through a notary. For this, an agency is not necessarily required, unless maybe to find a client. If we're talking about short-term rentals, for a season, for a month, for 3 months, it is mandatory, a licensed real estate agency. And if it's a daily rental, then naturally it's either a management company or a licensed agency, and this is a specific requirement for the property. Well, as I already mentioned, this usually applies to studios because you need the consent of all owners to rent it out, and so on. So there is a whole list of requirements for what must be included. Thank you. In this complex that is being rented out, developers, with rare exceptions, do not get involved. That is, the developer's task is to build. They don't even say that they will handle rentals. There are very few agencies, at least in Mersin, that rent out real estate. It's much easier to just sell, right?
Yes.
And to say that it can be rented out,
yes,
it can be rented out between those words. There is an insurmountable gap. Because I also only handle this for my own clients, since, let me emphasize, you can buy anything that comes to your mind and you like it. Maybe you like, I don't know, say a tree house, but it won't be rented out. Some specific location that you really like. Well, I won't have tenants because I've been doing this for 17 years. I've been in the market and I've already built certain relationships with tenants. I have tenants who year after year come to, say, the same apartment or to the same complex, and they like it. I know the locations that will be rented out. So regarding profitability, we have the opposite situation. We don't have hotels. Maybe that's why Mersin isn't so popular, but we're betting on domestic tourism in Mersin. Ankara is nearby, the capital of Turkey, and Adana is a major city with 6 million people. Half of Turkey comes to Mersin for vacation. Turks are more generous. When it comes to renting, in other words, buying here is inexpensive, but renting is already expensive. So everyone thinks that if the purchase price is low, then the rent must also be cheap. And then they find out that the few hotels we have, which are business class, cost, let's say, 100 euros per night. And there are only a handful of 5-star hotels. 1, 2, 3, no joke. That's how few hotels there are. And that's why our apartments don't compete with hotels. And that's probably a good advantage for an investor, financially speaking. Most often people rent for a month to 3 months. I should note that I do handle annual rentals, but I don't really like them. The returns just aren't there, for the owner or for me. It's interesting when we rent out for the season. During the season, a 1-bedroom apartment can go for up to 1,000 euros. So from 700 to 1,000 euros in the season. In winter, our winter is mild, just 2 months. So the price drops to 400 euros per month. All additional options. I have my own cleaners. I don't know how many spoons there were, what condition the linens are in, and so on. Cleaning, electricity, water, and internet are paid separately. 30% is my commission. No one works for free. And for 70% of the year, the apartment in Mercedes was left with me.
Is it $1,000 monthly or just during the season?
1,000 euros in
season.
No, during the season per
month. In the season? In
the seasonal months, yes.
We have very similar numbers. From 300 off-season, 350 per studio, since we have a lot of studios, and up to 900 to 800. 1,200, depending on that, and 2,000 is rented here.
My boiler costs 3,000.
I'm renting. Yes, yes. Well, it depends on what you're taking and where you're taking it. For example, we have one complex that is rented out only during the season, but the demand for it is so high that
Does it pay off?
it basically covers the whole year. And here, everyone chooses for themselves. Either you rent out all year round, for example, and you see, well, you basically get the same profitability, roughly
Speaking. In your opinion, which is better?
It's a personal choice. It's personal. Just buy the right property. If it can be rented out, it works.
In some spots, an apartment earns enough in summer to cover the whole year.
And
the apartment for 9 months or 6
months, it just sits empty. We have the same thing.
Less wear and tear.
We call these Turkish complexes. Look for them yourself if you want. Or contact us. Turkish complexes. Well, why Turkish, you might ask? Because they have everything. That's rare for Batumi. These are luxurious private beaches, which you simply don't find in Batumi at all. And by the way, let me say first, these include tennis courts, 5 to 6 to 7 swimming pools, and a bunch of restaurants inside. We have something like that too, but only a few. And the prices there are completely different, and everything is in high demand. And Georgians themselves love it. Very much. These were health resorts surrounded by forests, and even inside the complex there are trees.
Does that mean you can rent there?
You can rent, but buying is costly. You can buy. Now you can buy. You can buy, just reach out, we'll sell it.
So if you need it?
Yes, that's really good.
By the way, if you have any questions about Georgia or Turkey, contact information, phone numbers, or QR codes will periodically appear on the screen, which you can use to get in touch and ask your questions. And in the comments, let's meet in the comments. So I'm waiting for your impressions about visiting Mersin or Batumi. And what do you think in general, which country is better for living for you? Because the best is the enemy of the good, probably. Everyone is looking for something interesting for themselves because everyone has a different idea of what is good. And what do you think? Let's vote for Pulse or for Georgia. Later, we'll come back and read them. After all, for the family. Today, we're considering real estate as a business. For myself, what would you buy for yourself? In what format would you live for yourself? Family? A family lives there? 1 or 2 children? What format?
First I want to say that I would choose Batumi for myself. I sold in Bulgaria for many years. As you know, we sold a lot on Sunny Beach. That's not a year-round format. It's a resort. Batumi, for example, is fundamentally different from Sunny Beach, from Bulgaria, in that it's a year-round city, a big city. By the way, it's not 2 million, but only about 600,000 native residents, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong, but I think it's 600,000. But it's still a big city, with a theatre, cinemas, huge malls, luxurious high-rises, museums, and historical monuments. In other words, there's so much to see and do there. This is old Batumi, and it inspires admiration. So first of all, I would recommend Batumi for families to live permanently. There are schools, universities, absolutely everything you need. Healthcare, absolutely everything. Absolutely everything. You buy health insurance, foreigners can only do it this way. Yes, either insurance or direct payment. Accordingly, you use it and you are protected in this regard. So it's suitable for living. The cost of living, I think, is similar to the cost in Moscow, but Moscow was not a cheap city. In Batumi, during the season, is definitely not a cheap city. Off-season, when you already live here, you start to understand how things work and it gets cheaper. So,
am I understanding correctly that in Batumi, the cost of living, food,
groceries,
it depends on the season?
Yes. So it depends on the season, on where you bought your apartment and where you go shopping. There are shopping centers on the first coastline. There are many, and they're big, really, and it's quite expensive there. Well, I would say it's like in Moscow, more or less. A lot of my friends have complained to me. I thought there would be markets with fruit, but it's not like that. It's a city, a powerful city. And there, you shop in supermarkets, just like you would in Moscow. Well, maybe with a wider selection. There are national products, some of them. Georgia has amazing cuisine, after all. Well, it's a matter of taste, but many people just love it, yes. Of course, there are lots of delicious restaurants there. If you don't eat on the main strip, if you already know the places, then it will definitely be cheaper. But Batumi is definitely very dependent on the season. It's more location dependent than season dependent. There are residential districts where foreigners don't buy, and there it's significantly cheaper, up to 30 to 40% less.
Interesting. If we live there, right? Adaptation
to the language? There isn't any. Everyone says, I moved here, the language is Russian. Well, Georgian too, but everyone speaks Russian.
Well, if you don't know Georgian, you can't even read it.
Everyone speaks Russian.
So
Absolutely. English, Russian, all the young people know English. You moved like from the Marina district to the Kovrino district, I don't know, something like that. So basically, nothing changes. There's no adaptation. Everyone says there's no adaptation. You see what I mean?
the Orthodox Church.
Yes. There are Orthodox churches standing there. They're very religious, by the way, yes. All the holidays are the same. They're very friendly towards Russians. No matter what people say, they're very friendly. Yes, and not just towards Russians. They're friendly towards Ukrainians too, by the way. They're friendly towards Belarusians and towards Americans as well. That's just how they are, these guys. So if you don't start acting aggressively yourself, they're pretty southern, you know? But if you smile, there are a lot more smiles, a lot more of everything. There are a lot of international schools, American
schools, British schools.
Education is free in Georgian, of course, if you have a residence permit, or you can pay for instruction in English. There are some Russian schools as well. Yes, there are. Yes, there are. The name just slipped my mind. I'll mention it later. It's a school named after a famous politician of ours. Yes, there are. There are. Well, it's probably better to study in English abroad anyway, to improve your language skills. So,
for relocants, as I heard, it's an excellent place.
Yes, many people choose it, a lot of people. It's very calm, very accessible. Everything works, messengers work. Well, moving on.
Web unknown problems.
Or rather, unknown problems. Well, we know if there are Russians here, hello to everyone. So, yes. And the main reason people choose it, honestly, is that moving is very simple. You just get on a plane with your suitcase, fly for 2 hours, 240, yes, and you land. At Batumi airport, you roll your suitcase, immediately arrange a rental, and just like that, you're relaxing. You speak Russian and no one will say a bad word to you. And I also want to say that Batumi is a city of dogs. I don't know why it's like that. There are lots of friendly dogs. Friendly, huge dogs just walking around like this, all friendly. Seriously, they all have chips, all of them, chips on their ears, all friendly, affectionate. They come up to you. But there are also a lot of people who come here with their dogs, by the way. I don't know if that's a local thing.
If you love dogs, come to Batumi. But if you love cats, come to Mersin. We're voting for cats and dogs.
So that's how it is, and that's why the picture turns out to be so pleasant. Of course, Georgia doesn't compete with the United Arab Emirates in terms of status or in some other ways. There's no competition here. Everyone chooses what's right for them. But here there is simplicity. No visa required, no paperwork at all, you just fly. And if you need to fly back, you just fly back. And you can do this 2 or 3 times a month. By the way, tickets are very inexpensive outside of the season. Tickets. If they increase the number of flights now, it will be even cheaper. And I think they will increase them. And right now it's quite independent, but rather pro-Russian. I wouldn't say pro-Russian, but the policy is independent and calm. And all this talk about demonstrations happening somewhere in Tbilisi, it doesn't affect us at all. At all. In Batumi, in Baghdadi, everything is calm. That is to say,
Tbilisi has its own life. There's political activity there.
But even there, it's not like there's anything major going on. But I don't want to go into detail right now. It's not really my area. I have my own opinion, but it doesn't matter. I just want to say that for foreigners, it doesn't concern them. It's just that there's a pretty strict administrative apparatus there. You can't just go and punch someone in the face if you feel like it. You'll have to leave the country. You can't do things like that, well, just like in Turkey or anywhere else. Otherwise, if you're a peaceful resident, live by the law, pay your taxes, donate.
Pay.
Yes, spend money, please. Moreover, now there is a legal way to obtain a residence permit. I told you about it at the beginning. It's simple. That is, it is so accessible. Want to move? Just try it out. I would say, Georgia is suitable for a test drive. Do you want to try? Without risking anything. Foreign.
Realistic.
Yes, life abroad. Without risking anything. This is the best country to try. For the family. So many of my friends have moved. Some are living here, some went back, some left and are living elsewhere. I know a huge number of people. Then about the car, we remember that you don't even have to fly. You can come with your luggage, with your trunk packed with everything. You can just come by car. That's it. That's why I think it's absolutely suitable, as long as you don't have unrealistic expectations, if you don't have maybe excessive demands for service. Well, after all, yes, once again, this is not the Arab Emirates. The service here is good, well, average, stable. Georgians are always relaxed, just like the Turks, probably, right? So but
they just have a different attitude toward wine.
Yes. Well, I've never seen anyone drunk, not once. As many times as I've been to Abadoum so many times, not once. It's very comfortable. They treat you for free, you walk around, you're there instead of a girl. No one bothers you, so there are really no problems at all.
Infrastructure and life in Mersin for permanent residents with the family. But there is a significant difference here. The biggest difference is the absence of the Russian language. There is a Russian community, there are places where we meet, there are restaurants, and you can order Russian food. But nevertheless, you will always feel that you are living in Turkey, a completely different mentality, a completely different atmosphere. It's a good atmosphere, friendly, warm, sunny, full of smiles and love, with care for dogs, cats, children, loved ones, and so on. In other words, everyone is ready to help you. But I want to emphasize, how do you communicate? In any case, you will have to learn at least a basic set of Turkish words. It's not a difficult language. To be honest, in Mersin, not many people speak English, maybe even more people speak German. They try to speak Russian, they're learning, they're improving. There are a lot of Russian speakers, Russian-speaking people live in Mersin, so you'll definitely have someone to make friends with, to talk to go on picnics with. But education will be in Turkish, meaning if we get a residence permit, it is available to you for free. State education or private education. Children go to private schools and study in Turkish. By the way, the education is very strong. It's highly regarded and recognized all over the world. Who has graduated? Graduates of Turkish universities can work in America and Europe without any additional certification. That's why Turkish education is valued. As for work, life, and so on, Turkey, to be honest, is not a country for labor migration. It will suit you if you work online or if you already have money to live on. The cost of living is much lower. If we compare it to Moscow, for example, much lower, much cheaper. The quality of food products is very good. Vegetables, fruits, strawberries. Right now, I can say that the prices for living are excellent overall. They are not connected in any way to location or season. There are seasonal products, so naturally some things get more expensive, although, I don't know, cucumbers and tomatoes and other vegetables like that are available all year round. The only difference is oranges in winter and then, say, Sheftali peaches in summer. That might be the only difference. So for people who live there permanently, people who live on a residence permit, you couldn't ask for anything better. They are very satisfied with their lives and the atmosphere is very good. And if you can afford it, if you can accept this kind of life, you will be very satisfied. Living on a pension is pure pleasure. Living when you have your own income is wonderful.
I want to say that Georgia is also not really a country for labor migration because after all, well, no. But Georgia has a huge advantage, incomparable to anything else. You can open your own sole proprietorship in 5 minutes and work on any topic with the whole world, being a freelancer or doing... Nowadays, many employers, including Russian ones, allow remote work. This is ideal. But you have to understand that working as an employee in Georgia is not the best option. And the universities are also very good and recognized. By the way, there are exchange programs you can study. There are special programs with Georgia and in America, for example, or in England, where you spend part of your time studying in Georgia and part of your time in America, for example. That also exists.
By the way, this summer, our school is inviting children to London for holidays and studies. So literally this week, we had our child take Cambridge exams in English. The children study 4 languages. Well, we speak Russian, Turkish. They study in Turkish. German is taught from first grade, even from kindergarten, and German is included. So 2 foreign languages.
And English, right?
English and German. There are other options as well. You can study more, but I think in our case, that's enough for us. So life is wonderful. People who live there, who have seen and accepted all this, you will definitely feel that you are living abroad in another country with a good standard of living. And if you accept this for yourself, meaning no connection to the post-Soviet space, to the Russian language, and so on, a completely different quality of life, then you couldn't ask for anything better. About the prospects. What prospects does Batumi have, briefly, and what prospects does Mersin have?
Well, the main thing here, as I said, is that in terms of investment growth, global developers are entering Batumi, and a huge amount of land has already been allocated, including by Mar, which is well known to everyone. A palm is being built in Batumi, similar to the one in the United Arab Emirates. There are huge global investment projects in Batumi, so real estate is growing. That is absolutely clear. As for the overall prospects, well, I would actually like everything to stay as it is because things are good right now. Let real estate prices keep rising and let everything else stay the same. So it's still not too late to invest, not too late to get in. I can't say that prices are at their lowest right now. They used to be lower, but they're not at their highest either. I think there's growth potential of plus 30%, even plus 50% quite easily over, say, a 5-year horizon. So it's not too late. The main thing is to choose the right market. At a stage where the market is already established, not just emerging, it's more regulated, more transparent, more lawful. And that's a huge advantage. So yes, now is the right time, as long as you're not expecting super quick resales. If you're not expecting that. Today you invest X, and then a year later you resell for 2X, that's unlikely to happen. Maybe you'll get plus 15%, but not 2 times. If you don't have speculative expectations, then this market is suitable.
Are there any interesting investment opportunities?
Yes, there are. There are unique offers from our company. For example, as I mentioned, there are options for ready-to-move-in properties with installment plans. And these are developers with great offers, still at good prices in our favorite neighborhoods. And again, in places where pine trees grow and there are gorgeous beaches, there are still a few remaining units, some remaining under construction properties.
You can get access to such interesting offers by scanning the QR code that you see somewhere on your screen or by following the link in the info box below the video. That is, you will be provided with a catalog of the most attractive investment offers in Batumi. As for Mersin, I can say that after 17 years of living and working in Mersin, I can state that today is the best time to buy because there are no such great offers for residence permits or living. I want to emphasize that at the time this video is published, prices start from 33,000 euros. And I see that these affordable offers are starting to run out. Therefore, in the near future, prices will rise by the season, by this summer. If you want to buy property on the Mediterranean Sea as a summer house or as an option to buy and rent out, right now, Mersin is the best time to get in. You can also get our options by contacting us via the WhatsApp number you see on your screen or in the info box below. Under the video, you will find all the contact information to receive a selection of options that are interesting for you or for investment. Mersin has huge potential and the airport has just opened. It's still not very popular, not well known, and there are few destinations, but it's in the development stage. A Mersin-Antalya highway is being built, which will contribute to growth. A metro is also under construction. The city has a project to renovate the seafront and create an artificial beach. In the central part of Mersin, we don't have a beach, just a promenade. The city is developing, it's young, beautiful, and has a population of 2 million. And it awaits you with its palm trees, citrus orchards, and beautiful beaches. Maybe something is not quite right. What's wrong? Are there any negative aspects? In what ways could a buyer potentially commit an error?
Well, the first thing is the lack of due diligence when buying. Still, right? That is, there can be various nuances. And it's very important to build the right investment strategy. That's probably the main thing. In other words, when you buy, you need to understand what you're going to do with this property next. Resell it, rent it out after a certain period, or live in it yourself and choose the property based on that. That's probably the main thing. And of course, you should only turn to market professionals, even from the perspective of, as I mentioned, the rental business. This is really important because you could end up completely disappointed. If you're choosing based on a strategy, you first need to find a specialist who can implement it for you and only then buy the property, and not the other way around. That's probably the main thing.
Wise words. Because people choose, I notice most often by price and by the apartment itself, simply asking for the least expensive apartment available. That is not necessarily the best choice or the most appropriate investment for your needs. Furthermore, it is essential to recognize that having a reliable partner or a professional seller who will support you while you are abroad is a crucial factor to consider in your decision. The main thing is that you have someone so you can bring all your worries and concerns to them and they can help you solve them.